Now you'll be pleased to hear that I'm going to shut up and pass over to Steve to introduce.
Okay. And Jonathan as well. So you all know me as we've gone through that bit already. Welcome to Jonathan. Jonathan is Cabin FM's studio director, and also he heads our sales as well. So want to explain a bit?
I'll do the bit. I'll tell you what you're in for as well, because we've done a few of these workshops. We started out doing them last year when we got a grant, and we've been out to a few places around the town. And what we do, the main part of our reason for being here is to get some free idents for the station, because it costs a fortune to get professional voice work done. So we always like, when we come to do a workshop, to make the work part of it the people who've come, not us. And so we're going to ask you a bit later on to come up with some ideas, which we will then record with Steve's wonderful equipment here, some idents for the station. You'll be briefed on what to do, but I just thought I'd mention that now so that you can keep your brain ticking over at least and not completely switch off during the beginning of the session. I'll just talk a bit about myself, then I'll run down how the rest of the session's going to work. So as Steve said, I'm Jonathan. I enjoy the title of studio director, which was just a job title that was invented at some point in the dim and distant past. What I actually do at the station is look after all of the programming. So I make sure that we've got people doing shows at all the times we need to, which is pretty much 12, 13 hours a day, sometimes longer. We're on air from basically 6 in the morning through until about 11 o'clock at night, sometimes midnight. We have a sustaining service that looks after the output, just playing music in the wee small hours. But as you can imagine, with an entirely voluntary-based organisation, keeping it on air every day of the year for those amounts of hours takes quite a bit of doing. So that's one of the things I do. Then the other thing I do is I look after the sales, and I'll talk a bit more about that a bit later on. And I just accidentally ended up being a salesperson because it was the last thing I ever considered myself wanting to do. Unfortunately, I was that one person in the room who didn't say no quick enough, and I found myself as the volunteer when everybody said, who's going to do sales then, when the person who was doing it left. So I do the sales side, and that's an important part of how we raise our money. Now, my background in radio, if you don't listen too carefully, or if you squint a bit at this, it sounds like a career, but I don't really have a career in radio. My day job has been in marketing and communications, mostly for public sector organisations and in the civil service. But I started out at university radio at W963, which is a medium wave frequency you might recognise, and that is a station at the University of Warwick. And I walked into the studio thinking naively that they would just have, opportunities for people who wanted to help out in the background and make things happen. But the way it always goes with voluntary organisations is that as soon as anybody shows any interest, you're hoiked in, and the next thing you know, you've got a show and you're on air. And that was my first experience of it. And when I finished at university, I did it at a hospital radio station. And then I was desperately trying to parlay this into actual paid employment. And I had a little bit of that at Invicta Sound. Does anybody here remember Invicta Sound? Yeah. And they had studios near where I was. And I had been before that to a now defunct organisation called the National Broadcasting School, which was run by Michael Bucht, local Canterbury man, otherwise known as Michael Barry, the crafty cook on BBC Two. You might have known him from there. And he was also the founding programme controller at Classic FM. And he was also a programme controller at Capital. And he set up the National Broadcasting School on behalf of independent local radio, because they felt that there was a lot of radio stations springing up and there wasn't enough proper training as to the kind of skills that they felt presenters and producers ought to have. And so that was partly funded by all the local radio stations, and I did a course there. So that's how I met him. And so I was up at the county show, not having got any paid employment, and I saw him. And I said, basically, "Giss a job." And so he put me in touch with one of their presenters. And I did a little bit of features work for them. And that's it, really. And I stepped away from all that radio stuff until I moved to Herne Bay just over 4 years ago. And I did the same thing. I stepped into the radio station and said, have you got anything going on? And the next thing I knew, I was on the committee. So there you go. That's just my fault. I should have learned, shouldn't I? So we're voluntary, entirely voluntary, and we're an official Ofcom licensed community radio station. And the community, for me, is the most important word in that. We get a lot of people coming to us who think they are God's gift to broadcasting and that their music selection and their record collection is what everybody in Herne Bay wants to hear about. And I always say that that's fine if you've got a great music collection and you've got encyclopedic knowledge, lovely. You can sit at home and listen to that because we're running a radio station here. And the most important thing is having something to say, not having something to play. We're interested in people who've got something to say and who are interested in the local area. Because if it was just about the music, then, and I don't want to dismiss the music, we're a music-based station, but if it was just about the music, then if people want music, there's so many places to get it. You can curate your own radio station on Spotify without presenters getting in the way and without advertising. So if all we were going to do was to replicate what you can either get online or you might get from another commercial radio station, what is the point? Well, the point is that we're local to Herne Bay. So when you listen, it sounds like you're listening to something that's going on in Herne Bay, that is aware of where it is, and that talks about things that matter to people locally, or just talks about things that they recognise, places that they know, organisations they've heard of, events they've been to, that kind of thing. So when we get people joining us, I'm always very keen, actually, on people who have no background in being a DJ at all, but who are just willing to learn, because we stand a better chance of teaching them how to do it the way we would like. We'll look at the output a bit later on in the talk, just before we get you to do some promotions for it. But we have essentially two types of shows. We have daytime shows, which are more about being in the community, having guests in for interviewing, covering what's on information and that kind of thing. And then we have specialist shows, which are largely, but not exclusively, then out of the peak broadcasting hours. So, for example, at the moment, we've got Playing Favourites with one of our long-serving presenters, David Skinner. That's on air right now, and he actually does it live in the studio, so he'll be down there in the town doing that. And he plays a lot of Frank Sinatra, Ella Fitzgerald, American songbook stuff, and a bit of jazz, bit of bossa nova. That's his thing. And we have various other shows. We've got one of our presenters who does one on well, forgive my ignorance of it, but I call it prog rock. He doesn't like to call it just that. But apparently, and you may know this, that Canterbury scene was very big in prog rock in the late 60s, early 70s. So he does a show like that. We're funded by ads, we're funded by sponsors, we're funded by donations, and we're funded by our members' fees. We're not an expensive place to run, but it does cost money. We have a studio, which we've got most of the equipment for, but we have to pay to have the space it's in. We're co-located at the back of East Kent Mind at the Herne Bay Umbrella Centre. You may have seen it. It's in William Street, just on past the Heron's Leisure Centre, if you carry on down the road. We're in their back garden. We were looking for a new home after the council evicted everybody from the Neptune co-working hub, which is in the building where the swimming pool and the cinema is. And they thought they could make better use of that space by having no tenants. And it's still got no tenants 18 months later. So we were paying them a rent, an awful lot more rent than we pay East Kent Mind. But they decided they'd rather not have that. So we had to find a new home. Fortunately, East Kent Mind had a spare room they were just keeping old furniture in, and now they keep old DJs in it instead. So that's about it for now. I'll go into more detail on some of those things, but we've been around a lot longer than we've been an FM community radio service licensed by Ofcom. And my friend Steve here is going to tell us a bit more about the history.
Okay. I've been with Cabin FM incidentally for 8 years now. They were licensed in April 2017, and I joined them a month later. I used to be in unlicensed radio in my younger days on FM and shortwave. Used to have a shortwave service on a Sunday. And my wife said, why didn't you apply? Why didn't you apply? So I did, and still there 8 years later. So our background then for the station. Jonathan's gone through that. There's a picture of our new studio. That's our digital desk. It's like quite a few £1,000s worth of mixing desks there. And the audio isn't over phono cables or anything like that. It is all Ethernet. It is absolutely totally digital. From when it comes out of your Alexa or you stream it, it is digital right to the receive point. We even take the internet stream for feeding the FM transmitter at the moment, so it's beautifully processed. But that's our mixer there, totally in the digital domain there.
You use Cat6?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. There we are. So I believe the club's one of the venues was down at the Cabin Youth Centre down in the King's Road, and a radio station was established there, and we came on air at Christmas 1970. You know, how many towns areas have got a community station with a heritage that long? We did entertain the thought of changing the name, because what's the relevance of Cabin these days? But no, it's an important identity for Herne Bay. When you lose the connotation of being in a wooden hut, but that's where we came from, the Cabin Youth Centre. And this guy in the picture there, look at that mixing desk, vertical, very ergonomic. That gentleman there is Peter Geese. He's still with us, and he does a brilliant programme, the Sunday edition, 10 till 1 on a Sunday, and a great mix of music on there.
You still use the same mixing desk?
No. We've upgraded him now. And we found this, hunting for archive material. Radio Cabin had a magazine, the first edition now, and there's a picture of the cabin there, which kind of predates me. I moved to Herne Bay in 2000. So I think they demolished that in maybe the 80s. Did you know? Anybody know that?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, I remember.
Okay, so we've been in various guises. We were an internet station for a number of years, pioneering internet radio. As Jonathan said, we applied to Ofcom for a community licence, which we gained in April 2017, was licensed for 25 watts vertical, 25 watts horizontal component. We just used the vertical component. And we decided to rebrand a few years later to Cabin FM 94.6. There's one of our earlier logos there. So this is the broadcast rack where we used to be based down at Herne Bay Football Club. And at the top there is our audio processor, a Behringer Ultradyne, quite prone to the caps drying out and it being a bit of a problem, but audio quality was pretty good. There's the transmitter we still use now. If you buy like the latest version there, well, I've seen them like second hand for about £4,000. They're not cheap, and it really is a really good quality transmitter. 50 watts outputs, we run it at 25, but I'll be telling you about some improvements we're making, and it will be run more at its maximum output. Then we had the luxury of a 30 watt reserve transmitter. I think DCR in Dover bought that from us. It wasn't really needed. We had two dipoles. They were configured that way because we had to give a null towards the coast. That requirement's been relinquished by Ofcom. Now we can do what we like with the signal. And the original antennas when we first come on air on FM was on one of the lighting towers. But we are returning to the football club, but I'll explain more about that later. Okay, so as Jonathan mentioned, throughout the night we have an automated system, but we actually use, there are various software packages for radio stations. I'm on 4 radio stations, and there are several different ones to kind of get your head round. But this is quite a popular one. It's called Playout 1, Playout 1 Pro, and it's got some wonderful features. So I can broadcast live from my house by altering the top panel there, and it will actually act as though I'm putting the fader down with the music, or ducking it as they call it. But this here is it's all color coded, so the music tends to be in green, and then you've got different colours. So we've got like the jingle for entertainment news, or the international news there. We take a news feed which goes into our Dropbox, which then automatically gets populated into the system. Years ago, it used to be off satellite with IRN and Sky, but now it's actually sent to us. And then we have this run to time, which keeps it all to time with the schedule. Now, throughout the day, we have a recipe, a recipe for the programs, which we're not allowed to deviate too far from, So there is a recipe of like 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and today, kind of all mixed in. If a presenter really hates what has come up for something, say, for instance, the 80s, then you can go in and select another one from the same decade. But we try to have that kind of mix in there. Anything else you want to add with that, Jonathan, with mix?
No, all I would say is that when we used to be doing radio at university, that was in the days when you actually had to, before you went into the studio to do your show, the room outside the studio was a record library, shelves and shelves of records, and you go in like this with a great stack of the things. And I was really worried when I first came here, because I hadn't been in a studio for that many years. The last time I was in a studio, we had records, and I walked in and there was all this, and it's a bit forbidding. But it's actually a very easy and intuitive system to use. And it does save you a lot of work, because everything that's in there will just keep on going. You don't need to queue anything up. You don't need to worry about joining the end of one track to the beginning of the next. You don't even need to worry about hitting the top of the hour on time, because the man in the news booth is going to start reading it whether you're there or not, because it won't play until the system is ready for it. And I say all you've got to do, but what you do as a presenter is you break into this, and you can see these coloured dots down here. That one's red. What that means is the presenter has decided at the end of that track he's going to stop it and do his bit or her bit. And that's really what you have to do. But the system takes care of everything else. Particularly, I like the fact that it takes care of the maths for you. So you've got a timer the whole hour to finish, ideally, at the top of the hour, or we have an ad break before the news. But is that the gap time shows up there in the little red box. And it calculates how many seconds adrift you are, and you just tweak it accordingly. So it's a really easy.
So with this, you could take a laptop out, go to a local event, and broadcast live into the station from there. I've got the luxury of because I'm a carer, and it's good to do things while I'm at home, so I can keep an eye on my mum who's got Alzheimer's. We've got a studio in the garden, and I can use this software. It's called Webb VT voice track, and I can actually do. Well, I think all my shows are from that kind of that way, and it works really, really. You can't tell whether I'm there or not, basically, like that. So that's the broadcast software. Play out one, and our schedule. You want to speak about this, Jonathan?
Right. So as I said earlier, we have daytime and specialist, and there are occasional specialist shows in the middle of it. The big thing about the station is that although we're trying to be local and talk about things locally, as I said, we are music based. And so what is our music policy? And the way we go about it is to be as diverse as we possibly can. I'll come on to talk about audience in a bit, but we can't afford to do detailed audience research. But we take the view that we'll have a broad mix of music, and we have stuff regularly on air from as early as the 50s and during the daytime right up to today. And then in the specialist shows, we go right back as far as the 30s and 40s for some of them. And they are actually the show that does that, which is on a Tuesday, is really popular. There's a big audience for that, not in the area, but all around, because it's an unusual show to find
Sizzling Jim Williams.
Yes. Yes, Sizzling Jim Williams. But keeping it spread out, that's what we do. And the thinking behind that is that if you don't like what's on now, stick around, there'll be something you do like in a minute. We've got a question.
Do you ever have any problems with the routers? Because even if you use an Ethernet, a router can get problematic and break that internet.
Steve is going to give us a technical talk in a minute, but he's the guy I always point at immediately when I get anything technical. Because I don't know if you find this, whenever I've had a conversation with Steve, it's only about 2 sentences in before he's used an acronym I've never heard of.
No, we've never had that.
No.
So can you answer that question about
Jamie Dodgers.
No, we don't have any problems like that. No, it all works pretty well. And after 7 o'clock in the evening, we have specialty shows, as Jonathan mentioned. There is no advertising. So nothing is, there's no breaks in it. And it's just the specialty shows.
But yeah, this, I'm not entirely happy with the way our website displays this, but there are plenty of battles to fight on keeping a radio station on air, and this is one I'm choosing to ignore. But this is how the schedule appears, and what it does is it goes grey, white, alternately down each of the days, which is meant to make you distinguish between each of the shows. But it does the slightly weird thing, is that if you wanted to read across and read all the same shows, if I start here and say that on Monday, and I find the Breakfast Club, okay, there it is, then I find it on a Tuesday in the same spot. Here, it's Steve's 70s hour. It's not and then it's the 60s splash, then it's the Breakfast Club. I don't know why it does that, but there's a bit of work to do. But what you can see from that is there's a lot of stuff. And most presenters are doing a show a week. Some are doing more than that. Steve does a lot because he does all of our dedicated, or nearly all of our dedicated hours we have for different decades. And there's 2 or 3 of those on every day. But that means we need a lot of people as well, because we're not like Radio 2, which always have the same person on during the morning show every day, Monday to Friday. Be nice, because you get a bit of consistency and build up a bit more of a following. But we're all volunteers. People have lives and jobs and things. And so, yeah, it's a constant mix. And one of the big things that keeps me occupied is people saying, oh, I can't come in the week on Wednesday. Can you find anybody to cover the show for me? So I'm constantly keeping my diary up to date with who's actually doing the show as opposed to what it says here.
I've heard many people refer to radio stations like, oh, it's the same 30 tracks again. We don't get that here. It really has a very vast record library. I do 50s on a Monday. One of my old bosses has got a 50s jukebox, 50s style jukebox in his house, and he sends me playlists, and I have to try and find the tracks. But how many other stations does 50s? We don't want to emulate Heart or something or KMFM. We are totally different, and we try and offer a good alternative.
Are you done on your?
I think so.
Now? Rightio. Steve will be back. Coming up, as they like to say on the radio, he's going to be talking about the more technical side of the station, particularly to do with our transmitter. And then you're going to be back, because after that, it'll be time for you to start thinking about writing some idents for us. But before we get on to that, I'm going to talk about the sales and the audience. I mentioned that I've got lumbered, and that is the word, lumbered, with doing the sales. We don't take a lot of money to run, but we have to pay a license to the company that runs Playout One, that very colourful piece of software you were just looking at. We have to pay our license fee to Ofcom. We have to pay our music license fee to the Performing Rights Society, which is our biggest single outgoing. Then we have to pay insurance. We have to pay a bit of rent for where we are. And so by the time you add all that up, I'm not giving away anything that's a trade secret. It's about £1,000 a month that we have to find to keep the station on air. And that's without paying anybody at all. And we do that through ads, through sponsorship, through reciprocal arrangements, and through membership fees that we take off everybody who wants to have the privilege of being allowed to sit in a radio studio and talk to the world. Ads we get from local businesses, and it's really just a matter of going around and knocking on a few doors, emailing them, talking to them, and coming up with different innovative ways to make it seem attractive to advertise on the station. And we pitch it not just about the business benefits they would get through running advertising, but about it being a service to the community. And it enables them as a business to feel that they've done something good because they're supporting a community organisation, and we are a registered charity as well. Also, it means that they can talk about the fact that they're doing this. So they can talk about it purely in the business sense to say, have you heard us? But they can also talk about it on their socials or in any publicity they're doing to say, well, we do our bit in the local community. So And Herne Bay, as you probably know, is a town of a lot of small and independent shops and businesses, and they haven't got large budgets. So we have to tailor our advertising budgets that we're asking for them to spend accordingly, which means we need to keep on doing it, because nobody walks up with thousands of pounds and says, here, you have that, and I'll advertise with you for the next 10 years. It's, a bit at a time and constant work to keep them renewing. As well as advertising, which also I should say on the advertising front, that we do write and produce the ads, all included in the fee. And I usually work with the client to write the ads, and Steve here avails his facilities at his Rainbow studio to do the production side.
Which we used to pay, external companies to produce before, didn't we?
We did, yes. A significant proportion of any sales that we took was going off to a third party to make the ad. So that meant that you really had to take a sizable amount of money off somebody before it was even worth making the ad. But now we can do much smaller campaigns, much shorter and much cheaper campaigns, because we take all the money that they give us, because I don't charge for writing it, and Steve, so far, doesn't charge for producing it.
All free.
That's how it works. Sponsorship is another area that we do. It's like advertising, but you get to be the owner of a particular feature in the output. So, for example, we have a sponsor for our morning shows. A company called Foresight Solutions does that. We have a sponsor for the afternoon shows, which is Discount Tires. And they have a nice little jingle. In fact, I think they only did the sponsorship because they wanted to record their own jingle and sing it. So they do that. And we've just recently taken on sponsorship for a series which was invented for the sponsor called Vet Talk, which is sponsored by Broadway Vets. You've seen them on the roundabout there. And they wanted to advertise their business, and so they sponsor these talks. So Steve and I were up there the other day recording talks. So we play out the talk, and with that, they get an ident to say that they're the people who are providing it. And if anybody has a business and wants to advertise, or somebody who does, I've got a special offer on at the moment, which should get you on air for 3 months, right the way through to the end of January, for £100. And you get it written, you get it produced, and you get it on air 5 times a day. That's the kind of figure, £100.
Yeah. Is that sort of, you only appear once in 3 months?
No, you get to hear it 5 times a day.
Oh, do you really?
Yeah, which is enough to know it's there, but not so much you get thoroughly annoyed by thinking you've seen it too many times. Because if I see that girl in the restaurant on television who makes the pizza oven work one more time, you know the ad, if you ever watch TV, oh dear, it's an advertisement for some investment company. It's on far too often. Now, Aviva, thank you. Yes, it's pain. But yeah, 5 times a day. I mean, I look at companies that advertise in the various community magazines that you get through your door, like the Net magazine and so on. And I figure if they can afford to take a half-page ad in that, they can afford to be on the radio. And, it's probably cheaper, in fact, to be on the radio with us. And you can add it to your portfolio. Now, the other question that we always get asked, if you're ever in a social situation, I don't know if Steve finds this, and you say, oh, yes, I work at the local radio station. First question, oh, how many people listen? And the honest answer is we don't know, because for the big boys, there's an outfit called Radar. Now, I've written down what it stands for here because I always forget, unless I can test you, Steve. Do you know what it stands for?
The Radio Audience Joint.
Radio Joint Audience Research. Yeah, that's what it stands for. And that's the organisation which tells radio stations how many people they've got listening. So from the BBC's point of view, it's just nice to know, and it justifies what budgets go where and who's listening to what. For a commercial station, it's bread and butter, because it tells their advertisers how many people are listening and where you want to place your ads and with which station. We can't afford that. It would cost us more than our entire annual budget to participate in any kind of survey.
In business, it's often they use polls go out on ideas. So who'd have thought sending out a poll or on social media, asking people questions, because you can actually say quite a lot.
We did do that, and it didn't elicit a huge response, but it was interesting. And you're quite right to remind me that it's something we should do again, because our social media presence has probably increased a bit recently, and it is a useful way. The other thing we do is, and it's not absolutely accurate in terms of numbers of listeners, but it's a good benchmark to know how we're doing, which is that we do know how many devices are listening online. So if you're using a smart speaker, or if you're tuning in via our app, or if you're listening via our website, it ticks up. And so we can see that number, and then we use that number as a benchmark. So we look at it each year, and we can see whether it's going up or down. And I also use that number as a kind of proxy for the number of listeners that we might have. Radar says that 1/3 of listening currently is digitally online, not of a broadcast signal. So that implies that 2/3 of listening is over a broadcast signal. So our broadcast signal is FM. Nationally, actually, most listening is now on DAB, and FM is second to that, quite a lot further down, in fact, which is why we want to get onto DAB, which Steve will talk about in a moment. But we did a survey, and our survey says last year, the average number of devices tuned in at any given moment across the day, and we looked at it each hour across the day, was 19. This year, it's 26, which is a 37% increase. And the year before, we were 30% up on that as well. The average daily number, 258 last year, 332 this year. So that's up 29%. And the weekly total in 2024 was 1,809. And this year, 2,326, 29% higher. So that's moving in the right direction. It's not the number of listeners, but it's a good indicator of what's working and how things are going. So taking that little equation that Rajar says that 1/3 of listening is online, it's 1/3 of our listeners, we say, because I need to come up with some sort of figure for selling our advertising and sponsorship. So they say that's 1/3 of it. So I multiply that by 3 to get the total number of listener hours that we might have, not listeners, but listener hours. So if our weekly number is that figure of 2,300 odd, we end up with 121,000 across 50, if you multiply it by 52. This is all very crude stuff. And if I was standing up in court and my life depended on it, I couldn't use any of this. But we have to have some kind of proxy as to how we're doing. And if we do this from one year to the next, we can at least see this going up and down. So far, the last 3 years we've done this, it's gone up quite significantly as well. So we take that 121,000 and we say, well, that's 1/3 of it. So the total figure is 362,000 listener hours, which neatly works out roughly 1,000 listener hours per day. It's quite a nice figure. Sounds convincing to me that if you say to any advertiser, well, how many people are listening? I said, I don't know how many people, but I can say that across a day, we'll have about 1,000 hours of listening. That's, I think, pretty impressive for where we've come from as well. We've gone up by 1/3 over the last 2 years. And the reason I think we've gone up is because we were somewhat decimated by COVID. I joined the station just after COVID, and we had great gaps in the schedule. We had moments in the schedule quite often during the daytime without a presenter, when it was just the computer playing the music. And the interesting thing is that little stripy chart there, if you let that computer play that without a presenter, we don't get as many listeners as if you have a presenter interfering with it and butting in. People like a human touch, because if you didn't like the human touch, you probably wouldn't listen to a radio station. You'd just get it all on Spotify. So the people who are tuning into a radio, they want the companionship. And our shows which are presented get better audiences and more devices ticked up as listening than those without.
And the schedule's now full.
And it is now full, that's right. So having a full schedule, the other thing that's been good for us is being allowed to be out and about again. So we go to things at Strode Park, we've done the Carnival, the Jazz Festival, we do a live outside broadcast, and a few other events and things. So in terms of being visible and getting out and doing things like this, being visible in the community is very important to us, because the number of people you will go to say, oh, I didn't know we had a local radio station in the town. And I could spend, if I had the money, tens of thousands of pounds on advertisements, but the best thing is for us to be at an event where people see us. Right, that's the end of that bit. It's over to Steve for the technical bit on our transmitters.
Okay.
Let me get out of your way.
So there's a close-up of the transmitter we use, the Broadcast Warehouse, or BW they're called now, TX50. We have been licensed to run at 25 watts. And the picture you saw with our original transmitter site It used very lossy RG213. We were running at just under 25 watts, and the signal was pretty good. It wasn't too bad. But we are moving the transmitter on the 23rd of October. We put on our website about expect interruptions to the FM signal, basically because we're moving the gear. The programs will continue uninterrupted online and on a smart speaker, but the transmitter is moving back to the football club. They've invited us back with open arms, which is quite nice. And we're going to use the same antenna, a folded dipole, but we're going to feed it with Andrew's LDF 450. So the losses are going to be very, very minimal. And we're going to run it on the 450 watts. Now, we would love to go higher than that, but we could probably get licensed for 100 watts or so, but DAB's around the corner. Do we really want to invest more in the FM? And is it going to be a negligible difference between the 50 watts and the 100? We'll see, but that's the improvements we're going to make. So it'll be the best FM signal we've had ever since we've been on air. So there were 5 small-scale DAB areas advertised by Ofcom. And as the only licensed radio station in the Canterbury district, we backed Canterbury DAB gaining the license, which they did. And our operators have said they're aiming to get us on air for Christmas. Worst case will be towards the latter part of January. We reach a state where they have to give the license back if it's not on air by a particular date. Early on, they promised us 48 kilobits a second. Now, I've been on a Disney cruise and visited lots of European countries, and they have some really lovely bit rates. It's like law in France to be like 88 kilobits a second. We're talking AAC, not MP3 or MP2, which DAB, ordinary DAB is. We are migrating in the UK now to DAB plus, but they tend to.
Sorry, so
yes.
what's the difference between DAB and DAB?
Yeah, so DAB, yeah. DAB come on air in the 90s, and it kind of predates MP3. MP2, which is even a less efficient kind of system. The BBC still use DAB and the old guys, because it keeps it all backward compatible, and every DAB radio ever sold can pick up the BBC. But many stations now are migrating over. Now they probably have to pay for the bandwidth, so you can get a better quality on DAB plus because it uses the more advanced AAC, advanced audio codec, but it's badged up as DAB plus on for broadcasting. But as the UK goes, they're more cram them in and let's sacrifice the quality a little bit. But let's be honest, a lot of people don't realise. Yeah. If anyone here is a fan of Boom Radio, they run at 24 kilobits a second, but it's mono. Yeah. So you get a bit of a saving when it's a mono signal, and it'll be double that if it was stereo. We were promised 48. Now, the national services like Capital and Heart, they run at 32. So we could potentially be better quality technically than some of the nationals. But Canterbury is being allocated 7D, channel 7D. And so we're hoping towards the end of the year, because it's our 55th birthday at Christmas. So what a nice cherry on the top to get on DAB. Now there's going to be 2 transmitters for DAB. There's the westerly transmitter, which we found from our operator, that they're going to put an omnidirectional antenna on top of Rake Hill, which I think is on the cellular mast that you see as the road kind of sweeps round up the hill to drop down when going on the Thanet Way. 100 watts, and you can see the reach. Faversham is now officially in our service area, and it goes into big swathes of swale. And if you stand at Estuary View and you look out, you can see Essex. So we're going to hit Essex. We're going to serve a lot of swale, and this is probably of a particular signal level, which you'll get it beyond that, I would imagine. So that's the westerly transmitter. There's a second one, which is 150 watts. Not too sure about the omnidirectional bit. I'll question that bit there, but 150 watts, and it's from Elliott College at the University of Kent, Canterbury. One of our stable mates on the multiplex will be Canterbury Student Radio. You might remember that. I think 97.4, and they kept on being, they weren't keeping up with their key commitments with Ofcom. Ofcom kept on kind of, and they gave their license back in the end, but they're one of our stable mates, and I think they are definitely going to be joining us on the DAB multiplex. So the multiplex, if you're not into DAB, there's one broadcast RF signal, and the bandwidth is divvied up, and they can have, well, currently Digital One, which is the national commercial one, has 31 stations crammed into that one multiplex. So you can see about as I mentioned, the cramming them in. So we're very excited about this, coverage of the city of Canterbury. You better drive, quite a distance listening to Cabin FM digitally. Okay.
Right. Sorry.
Yeah. So just to make mention, as I said, we totally broadcast in the digital domain at the moment. We joined recently the CMA, which is the Community Media Association. They liaise with the government and represent the local community stations. It also gave us carriage by joining them on the UK radio player. So if you've got a Sky Box at home, or maybe a Sky Glass or a Sky Stream, the new little kind of streaming box, if you go to apps and go to music, and you'll find Cabin FM is on the radio player app. So you can actually stream us nationally, or beyond that, if you can on satellite, on there. You'll find us on all the various streaming platforms, TuneIn Radio, Radio Garden, Online Radio Box. There's a whole load of them. And we've also got our own bespoke Cabin FM app, which you can download from the Apple iOS store and also Google Play. So a multitude of ways you can listen to us, and also via our website. So what we're going to do next is record some ident. So when you're listening to the radio, there'll be an ident, the station you're listening to. Yeah. What we want to do is get you to voice various ones for the East Kent Radio Society. Over to you, Jonathan.
Yes. So the way this works is that we're going to give you a few moments, and I can tear some sheets of paper out of my book if you want to write down your thoughts, for you to come up with an individually, or as small groups or pairs, or however you want to do it, an ident for the station. And then we use these so that if between tracks or at any point, it's a requirement of a radio station that you have to identify who you are. That's actually an Ofcom requirement. And also, of course, you can't see who you are. It's not like you're on the television. So you have to keep telling people who you are. And it really works for us to do it with local voices. And so you are the local voices that are going to be doing it for us tonight. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to think about what you would like to say in your ident. What I would ask you to do in the ident is make sure that you do actually include the ident part of it, which is to say that it's Cabin FM, or you can say 94.6 Cabin FM if you prefer. But Cabin FM is the key thing to get across. At a very basic level, I would say, hello, I'm Jonathan. You're listening to 94.6 Cabin FM. Hope you have a great day. Something like that. Try not to be specific about the weather, because we've done it with the children up at Chislett School a couple of times. And then you get this ident and it's about the weather. And our computer system is clever, but it doesn't know what the weather is. So we can't program it when it mentions that it's a lovely day or it's a rainy day or anything like that. So don't mention the weather. But mention where you are. You can mention East Kent Radio Society if you want to.
So it could be, hi, I'm Alan from the East Kent Radio Society, and you're tuned to 94.6 Cabin FM, something like that.
Yeah. The one we had, which we haven't had before, from one of the pupils at Chislett, was enjoy these bangers. So there you go. There's the kind of thing you can lob in if you want to sound down with the kids. Before you get your brains onto that, we've thrown a lot of information at you, and normally when we do these kind of workshops, we don't chuck that much detail. But we figured that you were a technically minded and interested in the minutiae of radio a bit more than So are there any questions before you start doing the work?
RDS also on the...
Yes, it is. Yes. In fact, to go on Radio Player, they wanted to know what our pi code was. And those little... I did a talk, it's on our... It actually come up with the pi code. So, CFA 5 it was. I don't know why they wanted to know that, but that's what they needed to go on Radio Player. But yes, we do broadcast that, and we use radio text as well. It rotates, showing you what's playing, and we also we have the home of the cabin breakfast club comes up, and we fully utilise that facility.
Do you have like an ident, like a logo that comes up? Because I notice on my car radio I don't get one.
I looked into that, and it's actually factory installed. So as a station, you can apply and have your logo kind of put in. So it's not broadcast; it's just it knows when it identifies on the RDS that's the station. That's why you might get France In to come up, because it's all already programmed into the radio at manufacturer. Yeah. But cool, that'd be good for us to have the cabin light, but no, it's not as easy.
I didn't even know you could get such a thing on a radio.
Do you have backups? Some sort of backup to keep the system running? So if
a CD
go down, or
CD.
Oh.
If the Play Out One system goes down for some reason, then it does have a default set of music that it plays out, doesn't it? So it will keep the station on air up to a point if things go wrong within that system. And it's like any computerized system. In fact, we are about to have to do an upgrade to it, because you get this on your own computer. Microsoft wants to do an upgrade. Okay. And when you press OK, that's your life over, isn't it? Because it's never the same again. And we have had this experience with Play Out One. They're constantly doing upgrades to it to iron out bugs and things. And the last time we had it done, it was absolute.
We went through a lot of pain, didn't we?
It was awful, because then they upgrade things and it discovers little flaws and gaps in the way you've set the system up, and it doesn't like those. The version you've got is fine. The upgraded version doesn't like that, and it starts throwing all sorts of.
Another thing we found, wasn't it? We throw lots and lots of resources at buying RAM and fast computers to run it all, and then they change the spec, and you now need something even more meaty.
Yeah. So you've upgraded it, so it's suddenly beyond the capacity of the machinery that you're running it on, and things like that. So
how do you get on with power cut?
We go off. Simple as that. Yeah, we don't have any kind of more clever backup than that. We have had a couple of power cuts when we were at the Neptune building run by the council. I'm not blaming the council for the power cuts, but if it goes off, that's it. We're not on air.
We've had non-interruptible power supplies before, but
Steve, I've got a question for you.
yes.
When I'm listening, I notice the audio quality is very good on cabin. I've listened to a lot of online stations, and quite often you can hear the levels go way over the top.
Yeah.
Do you use a lot of compression in your output?
Yes, what we use, you saw that. I described on there. We had a Behringer.
Yeah.
We've gone on to better things than that. So what a lot of stations over the years have used is the Auburn Optimod. Yeah. We do ours by software, by one of the designers of the Auburn Optimod system. It's called Stereo Tool, and it really does a lovely job. We're streaming at 192.
Yeah, as opposed to 28.
It really sounds great. And what we did, we actually rebuilt the whole audio chain when we moved from the Neptune co-working hub to our new studio centre. Yeah. Now, one little gripe I had ever since I started was the noise floor had a lot of funny noises in the background. That's it, exactly. Yeah. We spent £500 on a digital sound card, and it's absolutely silence now. Yeah. And it's also made strangely enough, the processing works better as well without those artifacts. It sounds absolutely beautiful. So I challenge anyone in this room to have a listen to us. It really does sound about as good as it gets. Yeah.
I was brought up when you had to watch the VU meters.
Oh, yes.
And I never look at any meters at all now, because it's all taken care of. It doesn't matter what you do, how quiet it is, how loud
beautiful.
it is.
Really
it's
does.
All just squashed down.
And our DAB provider will take our online digital feed to feed the DAB system. So it's still going to sound pretty good.
I presume on the south side that you're going to be travelling more.
Well,
because your
I know
area is going to increase.
The footprint of that transmitter is very, very large, and we haven't really got our heads around how we're going to deal with that. It's not possible for me in my spare time to just schlep round the shops in Canterbury and have, knocking on doors and having a word with them. Officially, from Ofcom's point of view, we remain the community radio service for Herne Bay. The fact that we're reaching out further doesn't change that. That is what we're licensed to do. So we have to maintain that as our service. So the logic is then, well, what is in it for businesses, say in Canterbury? Well, clearly a lot of their customers will come to them from Herne Bay, so they should be talking to them. That's the position we're going to take. Where we go in terms of sales, I don't know, honestly. I mean, the nice thing would be to be able to afford to pay somebody to do the job, but we'd have to be really confident that they could earn enough money, not only to earn money for us, but to pay themselves. And that's a really, really big ask, frankly.
Do you ever put your website on your media on that screen? Don't list your website.
Oh, you mean here and now? Well, the website is probably the least used of our online presence. I should say that Facebook is the one that is very popular.
It's a great URL though, isn't it? We managed to get cabin.fm.
Cabin.fm,
Yeah.
yes. We've got, if anybody's wants a job, we have a gap in our kind of digital social media side. We've had various people who volunteered to do it, and they've sort of popped up, done a bit and disappeared. And so we are lacking on the social media side. We don't do enough. Facebook is old fogies social media, having got into it recently, but it is. If you talk to the young people, now what Facebook is, we can look at our Facebook following and we can see the age profile, at least the age people have claimed to be when they've signed up to it. And our age profile is nobody under 25 on Facebook is listening to us. That doesn't mean there's nobody under 25 listening. It means that Facebook is skewed older. But the general UK profile of the age range on Facebook is, say here, at this end of the older spectrum. But our profile for cabin is even older than that. And that reflects the demographic of the town as much as anything else. So, but we do need to appeal more to a wider age group. We've got some of our presenters who come to us from Herne Bay High, for example, and they do screw their faces up a bit about some of the music that we have on the station, and they certainly screw their noses up a bit about being on Facebook, and they think we should be doing more on TikTok and
we
things.
wouldn't like some of the music they like, though.
No, that is the dilemma, and so.
Music. Most of the people, young kids I know, listening to the music I grew up with.
Steve was saying this the other day about it.
Not the ones.
There's a micro pub in Herne Bay called The Pub, and they've actually unusually got
I've not tried it yet, but that's just around the corner from where I live.
highly recommended, yeah. They've got a music system in there. It's normally on Radio Caroline, yeah, but you can put LPs on there, and it's amazing what some of the youngsters pick out there. It is a lot of the classic stuff.
They
Yeah.
seem to go for what I used to listen to. Not well, certainly in the Northern Soul scene and the mod sort of scene. There's a lot coming to it.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And look at the record shops coming back to the old vinyl.
Yeah.
That's really taken off a lot, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it poses, all of these things pose very big sort of existential questions for Cabin FM in terms of, if we're for Herne Bay but we're reaching Canterbury and Faversham, what kind of identity do we have for people who are living in those areas and listening to us? I mean, how much are they going to put up with just hearing about what's on at the King's Hall or Pier Salon? They're going to want to hear a bit of a wider representation of their own area. And how are we going to get advertisers to come on board? And then also, what is our music policy? Can we sustain this idea that we're just everything from the 50s to the present day? Or are we going to have to choose and say, well, we are not going to be playing, music that's in the charts currently, because some of it is just unlistenable from the point of view of a lot of our audience. So are we willing to alienate those people for the 3 minutes it's on? Or are we going to say, no, and we won't do that at all? We'll go with our Facebook profile and we'll say, if you're not a grown-up, we're not for you, frankly. And maybe that's the way we need to go. But to do that in an informed way would require us to have a much greater understanding of our audience than we can afford. So we've got to get our heads around how we do that. Right, you put off your
Have
work.
we surprised you in what goes on with running a community station? Yeah.
Do you not get cheaper rates? The fact you're a charity when you go for these licenses.
I don't know if the rates are cheaper. They are what community radio stations pay. So there's quite a lot of community radio stations in the country. So we do our best to get good rates. But yeah, the nice thing about PRS, for example, and I don't know how it works for a big station, is that we don't have to do needle time. If anybody's ever familiar with the concept of needle time, back in the day, you used to have to log every single track that was played and for how long it was played and who the artist was, who the composer was, who the record label was. They just give us a kind of a flat rate based on how many people we've got listening online. That's how the PRS system works.
And license us to store music as well, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yes, it's not just broadcasting, storing music as well.
So,
It's got to be from official sources. We can't just download it from somewhere.
yeah. Yes, it's got to be a proper thing, not some kind of pirate or dodgy copy. But they don't want to know which track we played or how long we played it. It's just a fee that we pay based on the size of the station broadly. I'm not sure how or if that's going to be affected once we get onto DAB and we're doing a bit more. We do pre-record. The system that Steve showed you earlier, the stripy colourful chart, you can record your links into that at home, as he was saying. So, for example, I was away yesterday when my show goes out for 3 hours in the morning, and I recorded it the week before. And what you do is you go into the system at home, and you say, I want to say something here, click, say it, job done, there's your link. And so you can rattle through, do the links, and you don't have to sit there while the music plays.
Fades it all in and out for you.
Yeah, and you go straight on to the next one. So you can record your 3 hour show in less
I'm
than
on
an
in
hour.
55 minutes time.
The real pirate radio days. Hilltop.
They did, didn't they? Yeah.
Recorded programs on a cassette. Go in and hope it's on the right.
God, cassettes.
Yes. They
Good old
were the
cassettes.
days, weren't they?
The days of C120s where you get now, which is show on it.
That's it, exactly. Yeah.
Now, you've put off doing your work long enough. It's time for your work. We want these station idents. So what we're going to do is I'm going to give you, it's coming around to 10 past 8. I'm going to give 10 minutes for you to think about what you would like to say for your idents. And then Steve is going to come among you with his pointy microphone he's got here, and we'll record them. So
I'll let you do the pointing and I'll do the...
yeah. And then what we do is we'll just package them up, and before you know it, they'll be in our schedule, and you'll be able to hear yourselves every now and then popping up between the tracks.
So with regard to content, can we get a bit about East Kent Radio Club?
Yeah, well, there's two exercises happening. The second exercise, which I think you're aware of, Alan, is to create a commercial for East Kent Radio Society.
A free commercial.
Which we will play on air as if it was any of our paid commercials, but we'll do it for absolutely